What's up?
Oh, I'm just compiling all the top sports scores, news, and odds so I can make the very best bets.
Me too. BetOnline.ag.
Join today and receive your 50% welcome bonus at betonline.ag.
It was a reunion of sorts at Patriots OTAs with Ben Watson, Jamie Collins, and Brandon Bolden all back in a New England uniform. I'm Sierra Goodwill here with Alex Barth and Evan Lazar. Out of those three guys who are now back in Foxborough, which one do you see, based off what you've seen today and what you know of their production in the past, will have the biggest impact for this team?
I think it's Ben Watson. I mean, they signed him, the contract that they gave him is essentially saying he is the tight end one. He's the starting tight end. He was kind of doing that here today, is kind of the first guy on the pecking order going out there with the ones. He did mention, though, that things are different. Even though it's the same team, same practice field, same facilities, that the playbook has actually evolved quite a bit since when he was here the last time, which I thought was interesting. But, I know Brandon Bolden's going to play a little bit on special teams, and Jamie Collins has the upside to be a big-time contributor here if all things go well. But I think that Ben Watson has the safest, he has the best job security out of those three guys in terms of we know he's going to have a role on this team somewhat.
And the thing he also has going for him, which I think has been understated, and you mentioned a lot of changes in 10 years since he was here, but it's a relatively new receiving core, right? There's not a lot of names coming back. You have Julian Edelman, you have Philip Dorsett, you have a couple guys who were on IR last year, but Watson, you could argue, has pretty good chemistry with Brady compared to the rest of the roster. He's a guy who's worked with him before, albeit 10 years ago, so we'll see. Is it like riding a bike? Can they pick up where they left off? Is there going to be a growing period? Only time will tell. We'll get a good look early in training camp, July and August. But I think that that's going to go a long way for Ben Watson. I think he's somebody Tom Brady's going to trust. I think he's somebody Tom Brady's going to look for on third downs in the red zone, and that's going to set him up potentially for a pretty good year.
And this Foxborough Report is brought to us by betonline.ag. Head to clnsmedia.com/win. Enter promo code CLNS50 for 50% cash back on your first deposit. And now let's talk about who's going to have the toughest time making this roster. I know you guys might think it's Jamie Collins.
Yeah, I think it's Jamie Collins, really. I mean, I think Watson is pretty solidified in his spot on the tight end depth chart. Without Rob Gronkowski, obviously, here, there's not slim pickings right now at tight end for the Patriots. I think Brandon Bolden, the financial commitment they gave him, also his role on special teams. I mean, we talked about this a lot last year, Alex. Let's be honest, the special teams were not as good last year as they have been in past. And I don't think it's one player, but I think that Brandon Bolden was clearly a glue guy on special teams that Bill Belichick said, we need to bring this guy back. So I think Bolden's going to be on the team. Listen, Collins looked okay from what I saw out here today. Obviously, again, no contact, so you're not seeing anybody hitting anybody and at a linebacker position. That's kind of important. But at the same time, I think that, there's an uphill battle in that depth chart because there's a lot of players that played very good football for this team last year at that position. Kyle Van Noy, obviously, Dante Hightower, Landon Roberts, and then Juwan Bentley before he got hurt. That's four guys right there already. So Jamie Collins can contribute on special teams, though. We've seen that in the past, so maybe that's his way onto the roster, too.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. A lot of people are talking about him maybe versus a guy like Christian Sam, a draft pick last year, didn't make the team. You mentioned special teams, one that I'm looking at. I know he just got an extension, so not necessarily for a roster spot, but maybe for playing time, is Jamie Collins versus Brandon King. And how's that going to work out? And I do think Collins has a good shot to make the roster. He's not a lock. He's far from a lock, but I think he has a good chance. The question is, in what capacity is he going to make the roster? Is he a linebacker? Is he a special teamer? Is he a guy that's inactive week after week unless they get piled up with injuries? But like you said, Evan, and here we are agreeing 2 times out of 2, mark the date and time.
We'll both be wrong.
Right. Bolden's going to be locked in on special teams. He's pretty much got his role, and Watson's the #1 tight end like we talked about before, so that just leaves Collins.
And if you think that Bolden's a lock, how long is it going to take for him to kind of completely be reintegrated into the system?
I think the good thing about Brandon Bolden is that, A, he doesn't really need to run the ball that much to have an impact, because he can have an impact on special teams, and he's going to have a huge impact with these young running backs. Sony Michel and Damian Harris learning under James White and Brandon Bolden. It really doesn't get much better than that for a young running back in this league. Bolden is the type of guy that has really been a team leader at times. They had his boombox in the locker room last year, there the whole year, and Brandon Bolden wasn't even here. And James White mentioned that, he texted Brandon Bolden all year long last year to kind of keep up with him in Miami. And then obviously the big game that Brandon Bolden had against the Patriots last year, we don't talk about that anymore, but that sort of
he
thing,
doesn't talk about it anymore.
that was like, kind of ironic at the time, because it felt like to a lot of the players here that Brandon Bolden was still on the team, even though he was a Miami Dolphin. So I think the leadership qualities and the special teams ability are two things that are very unique about him.
I mean, to combine those two, you talk about teaching the younger running backs. The Patriots are going through a bit of an overhaul with their special teams coaching staff.
Yeah.
So to bring in a guy like Bolden, who's been here, who knows that like the back of his hand, and obviously there's other guys on the team, Matthew Slater comes to mind, who can help with this, but he's going to help kind of get the special teams going again as they have some turnover there. So yes, he needs to reintegrate to the system, but I think he's going to help integrate a system that the Patriots want to install heading into the season, almost like another coach on the field.
Nobody has more money invested in special teams than the New England Patriots.
That's true.
And they invested a 5th-round draft pick and a punter. So in terms of just capital spent on special teams, here in Foxborough, they are number one in the league by a wide margin.
Why did they win the Super Bowl last year? In large part.
And it was a lot of it to do with the punting.
Well, to keep up to date with all three of those guys, head to our website at clnsmedia.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel at CLNS Media.